Welcome to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. LawyerFair helps businesses find the right lawyer at the fairest price. But on this podcast, we just chew the fat with some great guests.
Yes, we are. We are here again. Thank you for that intro from Penny. It's the LawyerFair daily business podcast. We try to make it every day. It's a bit of a challenge. So I like to call it the almost daily podcast. But I was at a launch event recently for businessadvice.co.uk, which is a kind of sister of realbusiness.co.uk. And as part of that launch, they suggested there were 30 people in the UK that you must know if you're going to do well in business. And one of those is a guest this morning, Emma Jones, founder of Enterprise Nation. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm not quite sure what I must be known for, though.
Well, I'll let you dig a little deeper, but you're in the mix with some very heavyweight people, let me tell you. So I'm thrilled to have you join us on the podcast this morning. And of course, during the very small amount of research that a daily podcast allows me to do on my guests, I did discover that you have a little background in law. And I saw a lovely quote, Emma, that so I can't remember where it was now. Someone asking you why you've ended up following the course you have, and you said, "Well, I was heading towards law, but realised I'd been miserable overseeing deals in a skyscraper."
Oh my goodness, I can't believe you found a quote like that. Talk about ingratiating yourself to an audience before you've even started. Yeah, maybe I should have. Maybe I should have responded to that in a slightly different way, which is I would have made for a terrible lawyer. So I don't think the lifestyle or indeed the work would have suited me. So yes, I had a very brief career in law. It was called doing a degree in law and Japanese. I was then offered a place at a company at the time was called Wild Sapt. I think it's now become Denton Wild Sapt, which I think is now Denton's. I kind of haven't quite followed that progress. They offered me a job. I accepted it, thought I was going to become a lawyer, then got a job at a company called Arthur Andersen, so put my articles on hold with Wild Sapt for a year, said to them, I'm just going to go and get some commercial experience at this big American accounting professional services firm, and once I've got this commercial experience, I'll be a much better lawyer and I'll come back to you and then I'll start. And I guess as the story goes, I went back to them a year later and said I'm going to stay with Arthur Andersen. So it wasn't that necessarily that law wouldn't suit me. I just don't think I've got the great logistical mind that you need to be a good lawyer.
Well, listen, before either of us get trolled by very happy lawyers who sit in skyscrapers and oversee deals all the time, I mean the whole purpose. I mean, peas in a pod, Emma, is the way I look at entrepreneurship. And I think the entrepreneurs that do really, really well tend to be quite individualistic and tend to know that they need to find something that really suits them. And I think that's really where it comes from. And clearly, since then, you've achieved enormous amounts. And I'd like to suggest that since you launched Enterprise Nation, I don't know whether this is a coincidence or not, Emma, but since you launched Enterprise Nation in November 2006, the world has gone entrepreneur crazy.
I'd love to think the two are connected.
Just give us a little background about where the idea came from, how and why you launched it.
Well, this is the interesting thing. I launched because I could see that the market was about to shift in terms of so many people starting a business. So the idea for Enterprise Nation came from personal experience because kind of picking up, I guess, on the first question, I'd joined Arthur Andersen, stayed with them for 5 years, set up for them an inward investment group where we attracted overseas clients from Andersens to locate in the UK. And in the year 2000, I was, by which time, Andersens in the Manchester office, and it was the dot-com boom. And I was really inspired by all these people leaving their jobs, starting businesses and embracing the web to kind of change industries. So my industry was inward investment. So I left my job and with a business partner, actually, in my first business, we set up a company called techlicate.com, which was an online inward investment business. Incredible company, and 15 months in, we were approached by a bigger firm who wanted to acquire us. So very short story that within the space of 2 years, we'd started, grown and sold Techlicate. And the experience of that, and I should say that when we sold the business, so first of all, I'd left Andersens in Manchester, the very social office environment, and the next day, on a Monday morning, set up Techlicate from my spare room in my Manchester apartment. And by the time we sold, we were a business that had people in 5 home offices in London and Manchester. So I had an 18-month lock-in clause with the company that acquired us and spent that 18 months. And it's interesting you say that entrepreneurs are quite individualistic. One of the things I can say from that experience is once you've started your own business, it's very difficult to go back and work for anybody else. So I spent 18 months of the lock-in clause essentially thinking, what can I do next to start a new venture? I read an incredible book at the time called Free Agent Nation, which was written in the US by a guy called Dan Pink. And because the US is always a little bit ahead of us when it comes to entrepreneurship, his book charted the huge rise in people going self-employed in the US. And I read that and I thought, it's absolutely going to happen in the UK. And where I think people will be starting businesses is from home, which is what I'd done, from the spare room, from the attic, from the garden shed. So when we first launched Enterprise Nation, it was actually we referred to it as the home business website. Our first book was called Spare Room Startup, How to Start a Business from Home. So we were very focused on helping people who were starting and growing a business from home. And then you kind of fast forward to 2015, so a decade of being in business, and now we're the UK's most active small business network. So we've still got lots of members who start their business from home, but we've got a lot of companies who now outgrown the home environment. So we've pivoted, whatever you would call the term, we've evolved with them. But that's essentially where the idea came from, personal experience and seeing that the market was about to go into growth mode.
Well, that's really interesting. And I noticed, I think it was one of your tweets actually, that this year is a 20-year high in people quitting their job. So you really have been, within that wave, very much part of that wave, I suspect, in terms of the growth of people becoming entrepreneurs.
And I think it's going to keep on going. So there were, and maybe we'll come on to this, one of the other things I was involved with between 2011 and 2014 was a campaign called Startup Britain, which was all about encouraging people to get started, so to kind of give the country that extra boost. And I've been talking about this quite a bit actually in the past couple of weeks, that 2013 was the first year that the UK hit over 500,000 startups that had been formed in that 12 months. So one of the things we've done at Startup Britain is we started a startup tracker, which amazingly, up until then in the UK, Companies House, of course, had counted the number of companies that were being formed, but it wasn't really very public. So we made it very public. It was the biggest thing on our website. You could go on and you could click and see how many businesses have been formed that day, that week, and in the previous month. One of the main reasons we did that actually is to give people confidence who did want to start a business that they weren't the only crazy person who was thinking of leaving their job and going it alone, which hopefully it did have that effect. But 13th of December 2013 was the first time the UK hit that 500,000 mark, which was just incredible. And we've continued to hit it ever since. So 2014 again, and we're just about to release this year's figures actually. And this is the interesting point, is a lot of people over the past couple of years have said, this boom in self-employment is just because people can't find jobs. So it's actually a weak labour market. It's not because the British people aspire to be entrepreneurs. And fortunately, because the figures this year, when we're kind of back in confidence in the economy is looking good, you would have thought if people wanted to, they would go back to employment this year. Well, they haven't. They've carried on starting businesses. So a big theme for us in the beginning of Startup 2016 is going to be entrepreneurship is now embedded in the DNA of British people, and they are starting businesses because they want to, and it's not out of necessity. So hopefully the self-employment figures will continue to look strong. But of course, just another thing that the government and we are very focused on at the moment is making sure those startups stay in business by getting the right support to them and helping them grow.
Well, I mean, it's really interesting that I think a couple of podcasts recently, there have been comments on the complete sea change of support mechanisms that there are now. But perhaps 15, 20 years ago, you're looking at Business Link and Chamber of Commerce, and now it's just extraordinary. But I also, just picking up on that point about the British people, not being entrepreneurial. I mean, this is a country of a huge heritage of commerce, and I think one of the things that held people back was the environment of support, the lack of it, because it is a huge risk, and you're taking on a lot of unknowns, and I think the support network now is part of the reason why there's such a flourish of activity.
Well, and I had a question a couple of days ago from a journalist that if I was Prime Minister for a day, what would I do for small business? And you could say that maybe my response was a bit sycophantic, but what I actually said is I do exactly what this Prime Minister is doing, because what this current government, and in fact Autumn's statement this week was a significant kind of pointer to this, is this current government are essentially saying If the private sector is delivering effective business support, why should the government step in and deliver it as well? Because we would just be messing with the private sector marketplace. So, as you say, when Business Link was around, the government spent huge amounts of money on opening offices, putting in full-time paid advisors, and quite often, and I know this is the big message from Business Link, quite often those advisors themselves had never started and grown a business. And our belief absolutely over the past decade is the best business support comes from people who are experts, those who are entrepreneurs who've already been there and done it, and from your peer group who are going through exactly what you're going through. So the business support market is flourishing. It's something that we welcome. And the autumn statement this week, again, there were comments around UK trade and investment, even in the document that followed autumn statement, are saying rather than them delivering export support, what they want to do is cultivate a vibrant private sector marketplace. So we really are, over the next decade, I think, looking at the privatisation of business support, I guess you could call it.
Well, hurrah for that, frankly. So just looking in at an Enterprise Nation, Emma, what do you do? What does someone get from engaging with Enterprise Nation?
What do we do? Well, interestingly, moving on from that conversation of business support, what we have built over the past 10 years is hopefully information and inspiration for businesses in whatever way in which they want to digest it. So in terms of what we do, we help people start and grow their own business. The way in which we do it is we've got a daily blog. So if people want to come on and read posts about everything from social media to how to do your tax return, we run 150 plus events every year. And that's everything from an event we run called Startup Saturday. So last Saturday we did our biggest one where we helped 250 businesses in the space of a day get started, through to international trade missions. So over the past 2 years, we've done one mission per year, the US, and 4 weeks ago we took 40 businesses to China. But next year we're scaling up and we're going to do 5 trade missions next year and run export content throughout the year, mainly because small businesses want it, but also because UKTI is not going to be delivering it. So we do lots of events. We campaign on behalf of small businesses when we do think the government is making slip-ups. So we kind of act as the voice for small business. And the heart of everything we do is our membership. So when a small business owner joins, we try and surround them with all the support we can. And as I say, we feel that support should come from 3 directions. So one is experts. So we have an Enterprise Nation marketplace. We've got 13,500 small business advisors who are experts in everything from digital marketing to raising finance, leadership and management, taking on staff. So support should come from experts. It should also come from high-profile entrepreneurs who've been there and done it. So if you think, we've got this big startup show called Startup 2016 in January. We've got people speaking like Lara Morgan, who exited a business for £19 million. Will King, who's a brilliant entrepreneur who started King of Shades. So we kind of make sure that high-profile entrepreneurs give their expertise. But also what we try and do is connect small businesses with each other, because the most economic form or the most economically sensible way to deliver business support is making sure small businesses are talking to each other all the time. So we're very active. And just to finish off on that point, the younger generations, I guess, previously, if you'd looked at Enterprise Nation its first 5 years, we were very focused on the blog. We published a book every single year, Working 5 to 9, Go Global, the Startup Kit. But the younger generation now are looking to YouTube and Instagram, and they want business advice via WhatsApp. So our challenge as a business, or in fact, indeed our opportunity as a business, is to make sure we're in all the places that small businesses are, and that we're delivering support to them in a way in which they like to receive it. So we've just launched something called Enterprise Nation TV, which is Vox Pop clips delivered by YouTube. And a big focus for the team at the moment is we're looking at technology platforms that we can leverage to make sure we're delivering the right support. So this is why I guess we call ourselves the most active small business network, because we have content and then we try and deliver that in multiple different ways to appeal to an audience that wants to digest that information in lots of different ways.
Well, listen, I'm trying to digest all the information you've given me over the last 5 minutes, Emma. So I'm just trying to pluck out some of the highlights. I mean, certainly it's fascinating that the whole shift of how you deliver these support services, isn't it, from the more traditional ways through to the digital. And I'm interested in the TV station. And also, I noticed the marketplace is a very active zone on the site, isn't it? I mean that. I mean, is that where people are actually meeting each other? Is that about collaboration between members?
So that is where small businesses come to find an advisor. So the
Right.
marketplace was built for a government programme called Growth Vouchers, which came out in January 2014. And it's a point on which we're still lobbying, actually. But the government introduced what we thought was a brilliant programme where small businesses got up to £2,000 in match funding to spend on an advisor to help them grow the business. And when the government launched it, they went out to market and they needed a company to build a marketplace whereby when the small business owner claimed their money, they were then sent to a marketplace to find an advisor with whom to spend it. So we built the marketplace. The Growth Vouchers programme lasted for 15 months and everybody always knew it would go on for 15 months. We actually think it should have gone on for 3 years because back to this kind of entrepreneurship fever, as Stuart Rose actually calls it, in the UK, one of the things that really interested me about Startup Britain for the 3 years that I was involved in running the campaign is I think it takes 3 years to change the culture in the UK to try and encourage consumers, residents, citizens, businesses to do things differently. And one of the things about small businesses in Britain is we're not very ready to take advice from professionals. And in the US, they do this brilliantly. They accept that if social media or sales isn't their strong point, they'll turn to an expert and say, look, I'd like to pay you to teach me how to do it, or I'd like to pay you to go off and do it for me. So what Growth Vouchers started to do is it started to tip the culture where British business owners thought, actually, maybe I should invest and spend some money on paying an advisor. So we think it finished too soon. So the marketplace is a legacy that it's still there. It's thriving with all these advisors who we leverage day in, day out to deliver advice to small businesses. But what we are actually trying to work on for next year is to find some funding from the private sector so we can reintroduce a voucher kind of program to make sure small businesses get the right advice. But yeah, the marketplace is phenomenal in terms of it's just this huge pot of advisors. And just the other thing about the advisors is they're rated and reviewed. So when a small business owner comes on, they can search for an advisor in their location or in a sector, and then they can see the ratings and reviews against that advisor so they can decide whether they think they're the right person for them. So we've got big plans for the marketplace, but it's a strong community that's on it at the moment.
Well, if you're a business owner of any size, frankly, you'd be a fool not to be visiting this website, enterprisenation.com, and all of the information that Emma has discussed and mentioned, including the books. Are all the books still available, Emma?
They absolutely are still available.
Right.
We may not be writing them anymore, but they're very much still available.
Good stuff. And the one thing I didn't quite pick up on was the event in January. Just give us a little bit more detail about that.
Yeah, so it's Startup 2016. It's happening on the 16th of January, and we did it this year. So we're going into our second year. We're moving to a bigger building. So in London, we're expecting 2,000 startups. I should say this is a free event as well. It's all completely free to attend. 2,000 startups in Canary Wharf for the London event, but the event is also happening in 10 locations across the UK on the same day. And it's the UK's biggest startup show of the new year. So for the London event, we're going live with the programme next week. Across the whole day, we've got these keynote entrepreneurs talking. We've got 18 workshops going on, which is everything from how to use social media, meeting journalists. We've got, in fact, you shouldn't get me started on who we've got coming, but Clive Bull, who's a presenter on LBC, is coming to talk about how to get on his radio programme. We've got buyers from John Lewis and Sainsbury's coming to say this is how you pitch to them. And just a whole host. And in fact, as somebody said to me the other day, it's like a theme park for startups. So you'll go into kind of different zones. And the absolute vision for Startup 2016 is, and the reason we host it in January is for all those people who finish the Christmas holidays, come back to work and think, right, this is going to be the year that I get a business started and do what I really want to do. That's why we host it in January. And the vision is that somebody walks in with their idea or even just with the sense that they want to become their own boss. And by the time they've left at the end of the day, they've got the confidence and they've got all the practical tips that they need to get started. So you can view that information, enterprisenation.com/startup 2016.
Well, Emma, I couldn't have asked for more, frankly. It's been a wonderful chat with you. And I think law's loss was definitely the entrepreneur's gain. So let me finish on that high note. Emma Jones, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for having me.
Have a great day. All the best.
Thank
That was
you.
the LawyerFair Daily Podcast. Thanks again. More coming on. Well, in fact, it's Friday today, so more on Monday. Speak to you then.
Thanks for listening to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, why not subscribe and download each episode via iTunes or visit us on the LawyerFair.co.uk website.